Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
We're going to be working on this 2001 Ford Focus. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the tire off. One thing to note, this has these little caps that go over the lug nuts. There's two that are missing on this vehicle. The regular ones are a 19 millimeter, but because the caps are missing, we're going to have to use an 18 millimeter socket to get those off. So we'll use 19 millimeter socket and the breaker bar. Just crack these free before we put the vehicle up. Now I'll switch to the 18. These are really tight. Normally it shouldn't be this tight. We're using a 2-post lift to raise and support the vehicle. You can use a jack and jack stance. Now we'll take these lug nuts off. I'll use a little ratchet and the 18 millimeter socket. I'll take this last lug nut off. Take the tire off. Just hit it a couple times. This one's kind of tight, so we're gonna hit it off with a hammer. So I put one lug nut on. That's to prevent the wheel from falling off when I hammer it off with a dead blow. And I'm gonna hit right here really hard on the tire. And it'll pop right off. Now we'll take this lug nut off and pull the wheel off. Keep in mind that whenever you're doing any front end repair or replacing any front end components, you're gonna wanna go to a local shop and have your alignment performed or at least checked. That way that'll keep your tires from wearing prematurely. We're going to take this bolt out. There is a nut on the back side. We're going to use a 21 millimeter wrench. Go over here and go in between the sway bar. Right there, get that on the nut. And we're going to take an 18 millimeter socket and a breaker bar. It's a little tight next to the oil pan of the transmission. Hold that with one hand. I'm going to use a pipe for some leverage. Spinning free. Because this is tight right here, I'm going to use a smaller 18 millimeter socket and a ratchet. Take this off. And that's loose. I'm going to take the wrench off. Just use my fingers and take the nut off. Over here. Set that aside. So because of the location of the transmission pan, I can't get this bolt out. So I'm just going to use a screw jack and jack it up right here. You could use a floor jack. You might want to put a piece of wood under here. Be careful. Keep in mind your vehicle is, supported. You don't want to take it off the support. So just go up as high as you can so that the vehicle doesn't come off your support. We can unscrew the bolt and get it out. At this point, I'm gonna let it down because I feel like it's safer to not be up that long. Next, I'm gonna take this bolt out. I'm gonna have to use a wrench on the top nut that holds it on. There's a 18 millimeter wrench and a 15 millimeter bolt. So I'll use that and a breaker bar. Break this free. I switched to a bigger breaker bar because this bolt's really on there. All right, so now I switch to a ratchet. I'll take this bolt out. All right, so I butt the wrench up against the frame right here, and that'll help from me having to really put a lot of pressure on the wrench. I just hold it in place. And then I can ratchet the bolt off. Pull that off. So next I want to take this bolt out. There is a nut on the top This nut happens to be a 21 millimeter, so I'm going to use a deep 21 millimeter socket and a ratchet. It seems to be the easiest to get to this from over here. Go around near the exhaust and then set that right there, and then that's going to be up against the frame, and I can loosen this with a breaker bar. The bottom bolt is an 18 millimeter, and I'll use a breaker bar on that. Once that's loose, I can switch to an 18 millimeter socket and a smaller ratchet. Now this is loose. Take this down. There's the nut. So we need to remove this ball joint nut. We're going to use a Torx 50 on a ratchet. And then on the other side, there's a nut. It's a 15 millimeter and a ratchet on that side. I'll loosen this up. Take this bolt out. Oh, it's not coming out very easily. See if I can twist this. It's a little rusty in there, so I'm going to use some rust penetrant. And over on this side as well. I'm going to put the nut back on, and I'm going to hit it with a hammer, see if I can get it to move a little bit. All right, so now that I got that to move, I can take the nut off. I'm going to use a punch on this side and push the bolt the rest of the way through. Okay, now I'm going to try to remove the ball joint from the knuckle. I'm just going to use a hammer and hit on the control arm to push it down. As you can see, it's actually starting to move, so that's good. And that's out. We can take the control arm here. Use a pry bar right here. Pull this end out. Pull the control arm out. Here's our old control arm. Here's our new control arm from 1aauto.com. As you can see, the shape is the same. The mounting bolts are the same. The ball joint is the same. The underside has the same, all that. The bushing on the old one is extremely worn. It's all dry rotted and cracked and loose. The nice new part is solid. Get yours at 1aauto.com and you'll be ready to rock and roll. Now we're going to install the new lower control arm. We're going to slide it in the back here first. Slide this in over here. Just like that. I'm just going to tap this a little bit in there. I'm going to line this up here. We'll tap it up. And that's lined up. So you're going to get the ball joint. There's a little groove in there. You want to get the ball joint above the groove so that the bolt can go all the way in. All right, now I'm going to slide the bolt through the knuckle and then put the nut back on. So I'm going to tighten this up. I'll put the T50 socket on this side with a ratchet, and then I'll put the 15 millimeter socket and ratchet on the back side. On the nut, we'll snug this up and then I'll torque it. Now I'm going to use this torque wrench. We sell these torque wrenches at 1aauto.com with a 15 millimeter socket on the back, on the nut side, and that same torque spit. And we're going to torque this to 37 foot-pounds, just like that. All right, so we're going to slip this bolt back in here, but it's not going to go because our transmission pan's in the way. So we're going to raise the transmission up on this side. You can do this with a floor jack. Just be careful and make sure you use like a piece of wood or something to protect the transmission. There we go. Once you get that in, take the transmission, drop it back down. I'm going to tap this in a little bit with the hammer. Put the nut on the inside. I'm going to install this bolt right here, and the nut that goes here, and then this bolt right here, and nut that goes on here. All right, I'm going to start snugging up this back bolt. I'm going to use an 18mm socket on the bottom. On the top, where the nut is, I'm going to use a 21mm socket and the ratchet. I'm going to snug this one down with a 15mm socket and 18mm wrench for the nut. All right, now we're going to torque this bolt. I'm going to put my 21mm socket up top still. Just like that. I'm going to hold that while I torque this bolt. 85 foot-pounds. We also sell these torque wrenches at 1aauto.com. We're going to take our 18mm wrench, stick that on the nut up there. I'm going to torque this bolt to 85 foot-pounds as well. That's good. All right, so I got my 21mm wrench on the nut in the back. I'm going to use an 18mm socket on a ratchet. Right here, we're going to snug this up. So I'm going to raise up under this ball joint. I'm going to raise the suspension to almost ride height so that the control arm right here is as close to where it would be while it's on the ground. The reason I'll do it right now is it'll be easier to torque this bolt or tighten this bolt up. If I was to do it on the ground, it's going to be hard to lie under the car and tighten that bolt. So just get it as close as you can to actual ride height. I'm going to put that wrench back on there, and I'm going to use the 18mm socket and this torque wrench. I'm going to tighten this to 85 foot-pounds. Perfect. Now lower the suspension back down. So this wheel and tire, when coming off the vehicle, actually took a lot of effort to get it off. One of the reasons why is because of the two dissimilar metals corroding. You had the metal from the hub and also the aluminum from the wheel corroding together. So we're going to take a wire brush, just lightly on the wheel, go around, clean that up a little bit. You don't want to do too much. You really don't want to sand down the wheel, cause any damage to the wheel. But just get a little bit of that off. Just like that. And then over on the hub, I'm going to go all around the hub. Clean all this corrosion off of here. And this will help getting the wheel on and off. One of the things to help prevent this from happening is using a little bit of anti-seize lubricant. I don't like to use a whole lot of this, just a little bit, and only on instances where it's really bad. So we'll just put a little bit on there, then next time we take the wheel off, it'll be easier. Now we're going to throw the wheel up. And it went right on. And put our lug nuts on. So we'll just tighten these lug nuts. Now I'm going to torque these lug nuts with a 19mm socket and a torque wrench to 98 foot-pounds. We sell these torque wrenches at 1aauto.com. You're going to do it in a cross pattern so that it tightens the wheel properly. Then I'll switch to my 18mm socket for these other lug nuts.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1aauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.